These are the scariest books that I have read. This isn't the actual pile of books. This is just a random pile of books that I plucked out to demonstrate. So, lies immediately. You don't need to know any of this. This is too much. Welcome back to my channel where I discuss spooky books, scary films, spooky things that we watched as kids, and general shenanigans. Ah yes, my list of books that will scare the bejesus out of you. Or at least I hope they will. I originally compiled this list and a couple of lists on TikTok, but it's time for a refresh. Now, I might go on a limb and say it takes a lot to scare me, but really scares are subjective. It depends on the kind of genre of book you're into. My list comprises of the books that I prefer, which are ghost stories, spooky, vibe-heavy gothic settings. I have read a fair few disturbing books over the years, and I have thoughts on them. Whether I thought they were good or not, they certainly unsettled me, so maybe that's a separate video. I'm sure after this list, or partway through it, many people will be jumping in going, what about this book? What about that book? I may well mention books that left you completely cold or warm and cozy in that they gave you no scares. You may be absolutely hard as nails. You may look at these books and go, pah! That would be mean. And there may be many other books that you want to shout about saying, no, these ones need to be on your list. And I'm always happy to receive recommendations of more books that will scare the bejesus out of me. Now let's just get this out of the way. I haven't read House of Leaves yet. It's right behind me on the shelf. Had it for about 18 months. Not read it yet. Not sure why I'm putting it off, but I probably will. In fact, I'll probably do a load of YouTube videos about my experience of reading that bad boy. Another jaw drop moment, this list does not contain any Stephen King. Please don't click away. It's not that I have anything against Stephen King. Stephen King is a master, but these particular books I find a little bit scarier. First up, we have Dark Matter by Michelle Paver. This is one of very few books where I felt my heart racing while reading it. I was tense, I was frightened, I could not stop turning the pages, and I was terrified about what was going to happen. In 1937, our hero Jack joins an expedition to the Arctic. His expertise is looking after the snow dogs. They go out to a remote outpost, and as soon as he arrives, he feels an unnatural, malevolent presence. He's at first there with a research group, but one by one the people leave and Jack is left on his own in this spot with his dogs and something that definitely wants to do him harm. This book is a masterpiece in building suspense around isolation. The icy location is brilliantly realised. Jack's fear grows as the story progresses, but he's also worried about seeming paranoid, about annoying his research partners, but there is definitely something outside of his cabin and it is not pleasant. We feel Jack's fear growing as the story goes on, his fear for his own safety, also for the animals he's looking after, and I will also say the dog is fine in this. Reason to read it. You so feel alone with Jack while you're reading it, and you are wondering what the hell is out there. You just don't know. You are getting tiny senses from Jack, from the animals that he's looking after, and then you see glimpses of what is out there. And it is very much a malevolent spirit. It is so well done. It builds to a brilliant climax. I was terrified reading. It is definitely one for cold winter nights. Next up, the Victorian splendor that is The Silent Companions by Laura Purcell. Laura Purcell is one of my favourite authors. She is an absolute master in gothic ghost stories. She tells such great yarns. The Silent Companions is up there with not only her best work, but one of the best ghost stories I have ever read. It ticks all the boxes for a great gothic setting. You have your protagonist, Elsie. She is recounting her story as she is suspected of murdering people close to her. Newly married, newly pregnant, and then quickly widowed, Elsie ends up going to her husband's estate, The Bridge, a mysterious, huge gothic mansion where people have secrets. People whisper behind her back. They look at her strangely, and the house itself does not seem quite settled. Elsie also uncovers the story of a woman who lived there before and the past of the house, while apparently being stalked by spirits that are inhabiting the Silent Companions. These are life-size sort of 2D flat wooden figures where you had the likenesses of the people who were living in the house painted on there, and they're just all over the house. That's creepy. Those are just wooden structures with people's faces painted on them just all over the place. And the Silent Companions start moving and hissing and whispering. There is so much to enjoy in this book. It is a proper gothic ghost story. You have a huge cast of characters. You have intrigue, piled upon secrets, piled upon mystery. You have a backstory of witchcraft, of torment, and again, of the way women were treated, builds to a devastating, thrilling climax, and right up to the last pages, you are gripped with this tale and this sense of dread. If you love a Victorian ghost story, this is one that has to be on your list. Two classics that I want to include, the first being The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. This is a novella, you can read it really quickly. It is the inspiration for the brilliant 1960s film The Innocents, multiple adaptations since then, and more recently, The Haunting of Bly Manor. It is a tale that has inspired many, many ghost stories ever since. The story of a governess who goes to a huge country estate to look after two seemingly angelic children, but those children are being haunted and even possessed to a point by the spirits of the former governess and the former companion of the young man, and those spirits are not happy. The Turn of the Screw is a classic, but it is so easy to read, it is so frightening and so creepy, and it's a great one to read if you want to find out where the inspiration for so many of these haunted governess stories came from, and it still stands the test of time. The atmosphere is exquisite, the ghosts in it are genuinely terrifying, and the ending, I will never miss an opportunity of talking about The Turn of the Screw to promote the brilliant film The Innocents, made in 1962. Oh my God, 61, 62. It stars Deborah Kerr. The screenplay was written by Truman Capote. That adaptation is outstanding, and I still find it terrifying. If you want a great ghostly film, an old ghostly film, black and white, it is going to mess you up. Miss Jessup. More modern than Turn of the Screw, but still considered an absolute classic, it is of course The Woman in Black. Anyone who's put off by the words classic, let me assure you that while books like The Woman in Black and Turn of the Screw have inspired many new versions and new books since then, and films, and they've been adapted, and you may feel like you've seen them, the same plot so many times, those originals still stand up. They are still worth reading, and The Woman in Black in particular is utterly terrifying. You have a solicitor, Arthur Kipps. He is retelling and remembering his story of where he was sent out as a junior to settle the estate of a woman who has passed. He has to go up to the north of England, windswept moors, and to Eel Marsh House. A very creepy place that is cut off by high tides every evening and has a bad history. All of the locals in the nearby village are terrified of Eel Marsh House. They will not go out there. Arthur must go out alone to settle the estate of the previous inhabitant, but also learn about what is stalking that house and the grounds around it. And he does keep seeing a woman in black. This is a true Gothic novel. It is frightening and it is terribly sad at the same time. There is a real sense of doom all over the house, around in the location that Arthur visits. You really do feel for him as he is trying to find out what is going on, what is happening, the cause of the hauntings in the area, but you are worried that it won't really make much of a difference and his cards are marked. This does deal with quite heavy subject matter as well, and the palpable sense of loss and anger of the spirits that have passed really permeates through the pages. You feel it with them as well as feeling absolutely terrified about what is going to happen. A brilliant book, a Gothic masterpiece. Hex was a book that was recommended to me many times. A really interesting story of a witch, but in a modern setting. It is about a town that is cursed by a witch and the inhabitants cannot leave. They use modern technology and surveillance and the witch just appears in the town, in different places, in people's homes, in your house, in your bedroom, in your garden, and haunts the hell out of people. This witch is bound in chains and her eyes have been sewn shut, and the legend goes she must never ever open her eyes. This was such an original twist on a haunting where an entire town is being haunted by a witch and everyone is just going through their day-to-day lives. As the book opens, you have the witch just appearing and people going, okay, well, we just won't look at her, we won't deal with this. But while everyone has sort of come to terms with the haunting in their town, the young people who are there are faced with a situation where they cannot leave. They can't live the rest of their lives. They can't go out to college, to university, to explore. And tensions in the town just keep mounting and mounting to a great climax. This is a book that I would put in a slightly disturbing category. It was frightening in the way that the townsfolk treat the witch, the way they treat others, the way she wreaks her revenge in the end. And it is, unsettling, and there's some quite visceral imagery in there at points as well that left me going, whoa. You won't forget about this book in a hurry. Quick reminder, if you are enjoying this video, please hit the subscribe button. It makes such a difference. Next is a book by the author Grady Hendrix. I've enjoyed many of Grady Hendrix's books. I find them very entertaining, original, and frightening. I was torn between including How to Sell a Haunted House, but instead I have gone for Horrorstor. This is such an accessible book because if you want to get into horror, this is a quick read. It is completely original because it is written in the style of an IKEA catalogue. This is a horror story that is basically set in a giant IKEA, and the IKEA is haunted, and bad stuff starts going down. Furniture, bits of the area keep moving, keep changing. There is something really ancient and bad in this store, and the people who are working in there are trying to contend with it. If you've ever been in IKEA and you've gotten lost and really freaked out about it, this book will trigger all of those feelings and then make them worse. It's a book I would suggest reading on hard copy. You can listen to it, and apparently the audiobook's amazing, but the hard copy has little diagrams of furniture that just get more and more disturbing as the book goes on. I loved it, and I was frightened. It was tense. A book I listened to on audio a while ago and I have never stopped thinking about is Last Days by Adam Neville. Adam Neville is a fantastic horror writer. He wrote The Ritual, which is not only a good book, it's a great film, by the way. He wrote The Reddening, a book that I had to keep putting down because no. Last Days just seems to get hold of you and will not let go. It is the story of a documentary film crew who are pretty cocky, pretty arrogant, trying to profile the story of a cult and their last days. This cult that has multiple layers of story that are uncovered as you go through the book. It's really rich in its detail, and the deities and the entities that they worship or at least have summoned. The action in this book ramps up from the get-go. It does all of this detail about cults and cult mentality. If you're interested in cults, it's a great one to read. But the hauntings start pretty quickly as well, and they're not pleasant. They are really frightening, and there is a sense of, oh my god, we need to get away from this right from the start. And this documentary crew are trying to profile this story and also outrun something very nasty. In the folk horror category, one of my favorites, I will include The Loney by Andrew Michael Hurley. This is a very sinister book. It is a slower burn, but it's a great story about the power and the corruption of religion, of small town mentalities. This has all the great folk horror tropes in it. It is set in an isolated seaside landscape in the winter. It is windswept, it is desolate, it is bleak. You have a family and the story of two brothers, and the story is told from the perspective of one of the brothers. A family who are trying to cure their youngest son of an affliction he has through the power of religion and faith. You have corruption within a small, close-knit community, and you have elements of black magic, of dark magic in there as well, and the horrors of human nature. It is such a powerful, creepy book that is heavy-hitting in parts and a great example of folk horror. It will get under your skin. A book that I read very recently, but I do think it is worth including because of how unsettling and frightening it is at points. It is Penpal. When I first read this book, it took me a few days to really gather my thoughts on it. I opened it and I wasn't sure about the opening passages. I was worried that this was a Reddit story where it had started that was going to be overwritten and wasn't really suitable for book material, but I was quickly proven wrong. It's a story of a man who is looking back at his childhood memories, things that happened to him when he was a kid that have never really sat right with him, and that he is fuzzy on his memories, and he's trying to piece them together and really understand what was happening to him as a child. His memories are put together out of order, but we as the reader start to notice that something very sinister is happening, something that a child probably wouldn't notice or not really think too much of, but it does seem like the boy is being stalked. It is a short book that you will read very quickly, and it leads to a really unsettling conclusion. Very apt for the story. It is hard-hitting, but it concludes in such a way that will leave you sitting, needing a couple of days, needing to sort of think it over. I think it was brilliant. An absolutely solid ghost story if you want it. It is The Whistling by Rebecca Netley. This is such a good story in that it has all the gothic tropes. You have a woman who is coming to an isolated location in a big scary house. I know there's a lot of these tropes that I mentioned, but when it works, it works. There's a creepy child in the story that is hearing things. There is a whistling sound in the air. There is a spirit that is unsettled and secrets hidden in the walls of this house. You would think that that story, given how many times I've mentioned it in this video, is tried and tested and wouldn't give you anything new, but I loved the whistling. It was such a simple story, but very well executed and really did give me the chills. I was reading it at night in the middle of winter, and it was everything I wanted because I was really genuinely creeped out, and it's rare that that happens, so I always include the whistling in my list of scary books you should read. It does the job. Couple of honourable mentions. If you're in the mood for short stories, then M.R. James is your man here. Get yourself a collection of M.R. James's short stories. So many good, creepy, original, well-crafted tales in there. One of the most frightening non-fiction books I've ever read, The Road to Jonestown. This is the story of the People's Temple, of Jim Jones, and what would end up being the Jonestown Massacre. I researched this for my podcast. This got to me. It is brilliantly written, and it is one of the most frightening things I have ever read. That is a small selection of books that I found scary and stayed with me. I know there are plenty more scary books out there that I should be reading, so do drop your suggestions in the comments. Let me know what you think of the ones that I've mentioned. Did they scare you? Did they leave you warm and fuzzy? Were they so frightening to you that you turned to drink and ran away to live on a farm? If you want more spooky, scary, disturbing, weird book recommendations, please do subscribe to this channel, like this video, save it, leave a comment, do all of the things. I would love to keep bringing you more suggestions to keep you up at night.